A famous pianist mocked a blind single father in front of a camera. She had no idea he was the most gifted musician in the room. His daughter saw the clip at school. A classmate showed her on their phone, laughing. She watched her father, a man she had never once seen, humiliated, reduced to a punchline. She didn't cry. She closed the phone. She went through the rest of the school day in silence. That evening she climbed into his lap. She stayed there a long time without speaking. And then she asked him a question so precise, so quietly devastating, that he had no answer for it. A question that had been waiting 8 years to be asked. He had built his entire life around making sure she never had to worry about who her father was. He worked the early shift. He wore thick framed glasses with one opaque lens. He carried a maintenance cart through marble corridors and smiled at guests who looked through him. He was good at disappearing. He had been practicing it for years, since the night in a hospital in Vienna, when the person who had made him feel worth being seen had stopped breathing, and his daughter had come into the world, and he had decided quietly that from that moment on he would live only for her. He had given something up to do that, something immense. Something that the woman with the camera and 11 million followers had never once suspected when she turned her lens on him and performed her little joke for the internet. But his daughter had suspected. For a long time, she'd been researching him in secret. Old programs, old recordings, a photograph she'd found of a younger version of her father on a concert stage, hands above a grand piano, the Vienna Philharmonic behind him, a woman at the front of the audience looking up at him like he was the only source of light in the building. She had laid these things out on the kitchen table and waited for him to explain. He couldn't. Not that night. But 2 days later, in the same lobby where he had been made into a punchline, he sat down at a grand piano. His daughter was on the staircase. Isabel Hargrove's camera was still rolling, and the man who had spent 8 years learning to be invisible played something that made everyone in that room forget how to speak. If you believe that the love a parent carries for a child is the most powerful force there is, stay with this story, because what this father does next will remind you that some things cannot be taken away, only buried, and only for so long. Hit subscribe before we begin, and tell me in the comments, is there something you once loved, something you set down for someone else's sake, that you've never quite been able to let go of? To understand who this man really is, and what it cost him to sit down at that piano, we need to go back to the beginning, to a quiet apartment in Vienna, to a little girl with a sketchbook and a secret she'd been keeping for a year. The morning shift at the Grand Belvedere Hotel began at 5:45. Daniel Osei knew the building by its sounds. The low hum of the boiler room 2 floors below, the particular creak of the service corridor near the east stairwell, the way the marble lobby carried sound differently in the empty hours before the guests came down, a clean, wide echo, like the inside of a shell. He moved through the corridors with his maintenance cart at a steady pace, not slow, not rushed. The right lens of his glasses was opaque, a small disk of white that guests sometimes stared at before looking away. He had stopped noticing when they looked. That had taken about a year. Now he simply moved, and the hotel moved around him, and the work got done. The first call of the morning was a ceiling light on the 3rd floor. A guest had reported it the night before. Daniel took the stairs, found the room, replaced the bulb in under 4 minutes. He tested it once. He moved on. The second call was a radiator valve in room 212 that had been clicking through the night. He crouched beside it, pressed 2 fingers to the pipe to feel the pressure, and made the adjustment without tools. The clicking stopped. He stood, wrote the job in his logbook, and closed the door quietly behind him. By 7:30 he was in the lobby with a mop. The Grand Belvedere lobby was the kind of room that made people feel small or important depending on which door they used. The guests entered through the front, beneath the chandeliers, across the pale stone floor. The staff entered from the side, through a narrower door that opened directly beside the cleaning supply closet. Daniel had used the side door for 6 years. He did not think about it anymore. He was working the far end of the lobby when the couple came down from the lifts. Late 30s, well-dressed, luggage that someone else was carrying for them. The woman walked past him without looking. The man paused. "Excuse me," the man said. "Is there someone I can speak to about the breakfast reservation? We requested a window table." Daniel looked up. "Front desk will sort that for you. Just there, past the palms." The man glanced at Daniel's uniform, at the mop, then back at Daniel's face, as if reassessing whether the information could be trusted coming from this particular source. "I'll just go to the desk myself," the man said. "That's what I suggested," Daniel said. The man walked away. Daniel went back to the mop. This was not a bad morning. He had learned to measure mornings this way, not by what went right, but by the size of what went wrong. A dismissive guest was not a bad morning. A dismissive guest was simply a morning. By 4 o'clock, the logbook held 11 completed jobs. He returned the cart to the supply room, changed out of his work shoes, and went to collect Priya. The staff room at the back of the hotel's ground floor served, between 3 and 5 in the afternoon, as an unofficial space for the children of the hotel's employees. There were 4 children most days, corralled loosely by whichever staff member had finished earliest. Priya was always the last one drawing. She was sitting at the far end of the table when Daniel came in, her sketchbook open, a pencil moving in small, careful strokes. She did not look up when he entered. She held up one finger. He waited. She added 3 more strokes. Then she closed the book and looked at him. "Ready," she said. They walked home through the early evening. October in Vienna carried a particular kind of cold, not the hard cold of winter, but a cool, damp air that smelled of stone and wet leaves. Priya's school bag bounced against her back. Her hand was in his, small and warm. At the corner of their street she stopped walking. "I drew you again," she said. "I know. I watched you finish it. Do you want to see?" He said he did. She opened the sketchbook to the page. The figure was unmistakably him. The glasses, the slight tilt of his head that he didn't know he had until she started drawing it. Above the figure, she had drawn a small circle, filled in, like a halo, but rounder, more deliberate. "What's the circle?" he asked. She took the sketchbook back and looked at it herself for a moment as if checking her own work. "You'll understand when you're older," she said. He laughed. It came up from somewhere low and genuine, the kind of laugh that felt like something loosening. Priya did not laugh. She looked at the drawing a moment longer. Then she closed the book and put it in her bag and started walking again. He followed her, still smiling. He did not ask about the circle again that evening. He should have. They arrived the way important people often do, ahead of schedule, without warning, and with more equipment than the space was designed to hold. The film crew set up in the Grand Belvedere lobby just after noon. 3 people, a cameraman with a large shoulder-mounted camera, a producer with a tablet, and Isabel Hargrove herself, who moved through the lobby the way she moved through everything, as though the room had been arranged specifically for her arrival and had done a reasonable job of it. Daniel heard them before he saw them. The squeak of equipment cases across marble, instructions delivered in English with the particular confidence of someone who expected to be understood in any country. He was working in the service corridor behind the east wall, replacing a section of baseboard that had swollen in the damp autumn air. Through the thin wall, the lobby sounded different than usual, more deliberate. He finished the baseboard, loaded the tools back onto his cart, and continued his rounds. Isabel had already been filming for 40 minutes by the time Friedrich Mayer appeared at the edge of the lobby. Friedrich was 67, silver-haired, and had managed the Grand Belvedere for 19 years. He stood with his hands behind his back and watched the shoot from a polite distance, the way a host watches a guest rearrange their furniture. patient, attentive, not quite comfortable. Isabel was midway through a piece to camera about Vienna's relationship with classical music. She was good at this. Her voice carried warmth and authority in equal measure, and she used them the way a conductor uses a baton, with control, with intention, never by accident. What makes Vienna different, she was saying, isn't just the history, it's the expectation. In this city, music isn't entertainment, it's obligation, it's identity. Every room like this one, she gestured at the lobby behind her, carries that weight, whether it knows it or not. The cameraman adjusted his angle. The producer typed something. Daniel came around the corner from the service corridor at 2 minutes past. The corridor entrance sat at an angle to the lobby's main space, and the camera equipment a wheeled case, a light stand. 2 bags had been arranged in a loose cluster just past the turn. He could see the open lobby ahead with his left eye. The cluster was in his right side blind spot. The cart's front wheel caught the wheeled case. The case did not fall. It shifted, just slightly, and the movement was enough to unsettle the edge of the silver room service tray that had been balanced on top of it. A tray that had no reason to be there, that someone had set down without thinking during setup, carrying 4 champagne flutes for a guest order that had not yet been collected. The tray went over. The glasses followed. The sound was tremendous in the marble space. 4 sharp cracks, a high scatter of broken glass across stone, and then silence. Isabel turned. The camera turned with her. The producer looked up from the tablet. Daniel stood at the edge of the lobby, his cart beside him, the broken glass fanned out across the floor between them. He took in the scene. He looked at the glass. He looked at the camera. "I'm sorry," he said. "I'll get this cleaned up." He said it to the room, not to anyone in particular. His voice was level. Isabel tilted her head. Something shifted behind her eyes, a small calculation, quick and practiced. The camera was still rolling. "Well," she said, to the camera with the easy warmth of someone settling into a familiar register. "This is Vienna. Even the interruptions arrive with a certain drama." She smiled, a light, performative smile. "I do hope our friend here finds his way. It can be hard to navigate." She let the words sit when you're not quite sure where you are. The producer gave a small sound that might have been a laugh. The cameraman held his frame steady. Friedrich, at the edge of the lobby, did not move. His hands stayed behind his back. He watched Daniel. Daniel was already crouching. He swept the larger pieces of glass together with the edge of his glove, careful and methodical, the way he did every task without hurry, without ceremony. He did not look at Isabel. He did not look at the camera. His jaw was set. His hands were steady. It took him 4 minutes to clean the glass, collect the pieces in a waste bag, and wipe the marble clean. 4 minutes in which the camera held its shot. And Isabel said 2 more things to her audience about the importance of atmosphere in creative spaces, her voice never dipping below its polished, pleasant register. When Daniel finished, he stood, nodded once to no one in particular, and pushed his cart back toward the service corridor. Friedrich watched him go. Isabel's producer crossed the lobby and bent to retrieve the silver tray, which had skidded several feet. He turned it over in his hands to check for damage, then looked at his tablet. "I'll upload the clip before dinner," he said. "The interruption sequence." Isabel adjusted her collar. "Leave it in. It's authentic." Across the city, 22 kilometers away, a primary school was releasing its afternoon students into the cold October air. One of them, small and serious, with a sketchbook in her bag and her father's face already memorized from 100 different angles, was walking toward the bus stop. She did not yet know that by the time she reached home that evening, her classmates would already have seen the clip. Priya was never quiet. That was the thing Daniel noticed first, before he saw her face, before she dropped her bag by the door. She came in without saying anything. No report on the school day, No question fired at him before she had even taken off her shoes. She just came in and sat down at the kitchen table and looked at her hands. Daniel was at the stove. He turned the heat down under the pan and watched her. "How was school?" he said. "Fine," she said. He let it sit. He plated the food and brought it to the table, and they ate. The apartment was warm and close. The kitchen barely large enough for the two of them, the radiator ticking steadily against the far wall. Outside, the street sounds of the neighborhood filtered up a tram, distant voices, the particular quiet of a Vienna evening settling in. Priya ate half her food. That was the second thing. After dinner, he washed up and she sat on the sofa and did not open her sketchbook. She sat with her knees pulled to her chest and her eyes on the window. Daniel dried his hands and came and sat beside her. He did not ask again. He had learned over 8 years the difference between a child who needed to talk and a child who needed to arrive at talking on her own. She arrived at it slowly. "Amara showed me something at school," she said, on her phone. He waited. "A video." She paused. "Of you." The radiator ticked. A tram passed below. "The lady with the camera," Priya said. "Ah," Daniel said. That was all he said. She looked at him then, properly studying his face the way she studied everything she was about to draw, looking for what was actually there rather than what she expected to find. Whatever she saw seemed to make the next part harder. She climbed into his lap. She was 8, and still small enough to do this without it being strange, though she was getting close to the age where she would stop. She tucked her head under his chin and was quiet for a long time. He put his arms around her and waited. "Papa," she said finally, "did you stop playing because of Mama?" His hands, resting on her back, went very still. "Or was it because of me?" The question was small. She asked it the way she asked most things, plainly, without drama, as if she simply needed the information and trusted him to have it. But the plainness of it was what made it land so hard. She was not accusing him. She was not angry. She was 8 years old, and she had been carrying this question for long enough that it had worn smooth edges, like a stone she had been turning over in her pocket. He did not answer. He could not find the shape of an answer that was both true and something a child could hold. She stayed in his lap a few minutes longer. Then she climbed down and went to her room and came back with her sketchbook, not to draw, just to have it, and sat at the kitchen table. She opened it to a blank page. Then she turned it over and reached into the back cover, where she kept things flat between the cardboard and the end paper. She pulled them out, one at a time, and laid them on the table. A printed page from a concert program. Faded, the ink slightly blurred from being folded. The Vienna Philharmonic, October 2013. He could read it from where he sat. His own name in the list of performers. Daniel Ose Voss, composer and piano. A photograph. Small, printed on regular paper, the colors slightly off in the way of images printed on a school library machine. 2 people at the edge of a stage. A younger version of himself, taller somehow in the photograph, in a dark jacket. Beside him, a woman with dark hair and a wide smile looking up at him, her hand on his arm. Mira. A third page. A review, printed from an archived newspaper website. He recognized 2 words of the headline, without reading further. Priya had laid all 3 items out with care, edges aligned, the way she arranged things when she wanted to be taken seriously. She sat with her hands flat on the table and looked at him. She did not speak. She did not need to. The items on the table said everything she had been unable to say in the dark of his lap. He looked at the photograph for a long time. Then he said, "Where did you find these?" "School library," she said. "The computers there are faster." "How long?" She thought about it. "About a year." He nodded slowly. He picked up the photograph. He set it down again. They sat together in the kitchen until Priya's eyes began to close, and then he sent her to bed. She went without argument, which was its own kind of statement. At the door of her room she paused. "I'm not mad," she said. "I just wanted you to know I know." She went in. The door clicked shut. Daniel sat alone at the kitchen table for a long time. The photograph was still in front of him. So was the concert program, his name printed in letters that belonged to a different version of his life. He sat with these things until the radiators stopped ticking and the street outside went fully quiet. Then he got up. He crossed the apartment to the narrow closet beside the bathroom. He opened the door. Inside, pushed to the back, covered with an old cloth, sat a small upright keyboard. Dust on the cover. One corner of the casing slightly scuffed. He stood looking at it for a long moment, his hand on the closet door frame. He did not touch it. He closed the door and went to bed and did not sleep. And in the morning his phone showed a notification he had not asked for, a news alert, automated, triggered by a keyword he had set years ago and forgotten to remove. His name, attached to a view count that had not existed the night before. The apartment was quiet in a way it only got after midnight. Daniel sat at the kitchen table. The concert program was still in front of him. He had not moved it. He had not moved much at all since Priya's door had clicked shut. The overhead light was on, which she almost never left on this late, and it made the small kitchen look flat and overexposed, like a photograph taken with too much flash. He picked up the program. The paper was thin. Someone had printed it at school, Priya, careful and serious, folding it precisely before sliding it into the back of her sketchbook. He turned it over. On the back was a short biography. He did not read it. He knew what it said. He set it down and looked at the ceiling and let the memories come. They came the way they always did when he stopped fighting them. Not in order, not gently. He was 19, in a practice room at the Vienna Conservatory. The room was barely larger than a bathroom. The upright piano in the corner had 3 keys that stuck in humid weather, and October in Vienna was always humid. He played through those keys anyway. He had learned to compose around damage. His professor had told him this was either his greatest strength or a dangerous habit, and he had not yet lived enough life to know which. He was the only black student in his year. This was stated to him once, at orientation, as a fact, not unkindly, not cruelly, just plainly, as if it were information he might find useful. He had filed it away alongside the other facts of that year and gotten on with the work. The prize came at the end of his first year, a composition prize, the oldest one the conservatory gave. His piece was 12 minutes long and built around a melody his grandmother used to hum in Accra, something without a name, something she had carried from somewhere even further back. The judges called it original. He had thought, of course it is. Where else would it have come from? Then Mira. She arrived in his life sideways, the way the most important things tend to, not as an event, but as a gradual presence. A musicologist from Vienna, half Indian, half Austrian, writing her doctoral thesis on contemporary composition and the question of cultural inheritance in European music. She had attended a student recital where he performed. She had asked him afterward, with the directness of someone who had already decided to get to the point, what the melody in the 3rd movement was. He had told her about his grandmother. She had written it down, not to use, just to remember. They were married 3 years later in a small ceremony in Vienna, her parents on one side of the aisle and a handful of his cousins who had flown from Accra on the other. She wore a dark red dress. He remembered the dress. He remembered the specific quality of the light through the windows of the registry office, warm and angled, the way late afternoon light gets in autumn. The Philharmonic performance was October 2013. He was 31. He stood in the wings of the Musikverein with his hands loose at his sides and his eyes closed, and Mira was in the front row of the stalls, and he knew exactly where she was sitting without looking, the way you know the position of something you have memorized by feel. The piece went exactly as he had written it. That almost never happened. Afterward, she found him backstage and took both his hands in hers and said nothing for a long moment. Then, "You did it." He said, "We did it." She shook her head. "No, this one was yours." He had disagreed then. He did not disagree now. Priya was born on the Tuesday in November 2015. The labor was long. At some point in the early hours, something changed. A nurse moving faster than she had been moving. A doctor's voice dropping to a register that cut through the ambient noise of the ward. Daniel was in the hallway outside the delivery room when a second doctor passed him without looking at him, moving quickly. He was not in the room when it happened. By the time they let him in, Priya was alive and Mira was not. He held his daughter for the first time in a white room that smelled of antiseptic and the particular cold of a hospital at 4 in the morning. She weighed almost nothing. He did not know what to do with his hands. He had spent his entire adult life knowing exactly what to do with his hands. Prague was 2 months later. He had not cancelled the engagement. He did not know how to explain to himself then why he hadn't, whether it was denial or stubbornness or some mechanical continuation of a life that had stopped making sense. He walked out onto the stage. He sat at the piano. He placed his hands on the keys. He played 4 bars. Then he stopped. He sat for a moment with his hands in his lap. The audience was still. He got up from the bench. He walked into the wings. He did not go back. He flew home the next morning. He did not respond to the calls from his agent or his manager or the concert organizers. He answered the calls from the hospital about Priya's discharge paperwork and no others. The hotel job came 6 months later. He had chosen it for reasons he could have explained: the structure of shifts, the clarity of tasks with defined beginnings and ends, the proximity to the streets where he and Mira had walked. But he had not explained them to anyone, because no one had asked. He showed up. He learned the corridors. He disappeared into the work, and the work held him, and 6 years passed in the way that time passes when you have stopped measuring it. Now he sat in the kitchen at 1:30 in the morning and looked at a concert program his 8-year-old daughter had found at a school library and folded into her sketchbook. His phone buzzed on the table. He looked at the screen. A news alert automated from a keyword he had set years ago and never removed, his name, and beneath it a number. 212,000 views. He set the phone face down. He pressed both palms flat against the table and looked at the program and thought about Priya's question, the one he still had not answered, the one that was still sitting in the air of the apartment like something waiting for him to pick it up. He did not pick it up. He turned off the light and went to bed. But in the morning, when he reached for his phone, the number was higher. Friedrich's office was at the back of the hotel's ground floor, past the linen storage and the staff lockers, behind a door that most guests never knew existed. It was a small room, a desk, 2 chairs, a filing cabinet, a window that looked out onto the service courtyard where the delivery trucks came in the early mornings. A single lamp on the desk, no chandelier, no marble. Daniel had been in this room 3 times in 6 years. Once when he was hired. Once when his shift pattern changed. Once when a guest had complained about a repair he had made incorrectly, as it turned out, but Friedrich had listened to both sides before saying so. He knocked at 7:45. Friedrich was already at his desk. "Close the door," Friedrich said. "Sit down." Daniel sat. Friedrich folded his hands on the desk and looked at him directly, the way a man looks at someone when he has decided to say something uncomfortable and has chosen not to soften it. "I've seen the clip," he said. Daniel said nothing. "I was in the lobby when it happened. I watched it, and I said nothing." Friedrich paused. "That was wrong. I want to say that clearly before anything else." The lamp on the desk made a small, steady light. Outside, a delivery truck reversed into the courtyard with a low beeping sound that came through the window and then faded. "I've drafted a message to Ms. Hargrove's production team," Friedrich said. requesting removal of the footage or, at minimum, a correction. I intend to send it this morning. Don't, Daniel said. Friedrich looked at him. I don't want more attention on it, Daniel said. A complaint makes it a story. Right now, it's just a clip. Friedrich considered this. He unfolded his hands and picked up a pen, not to write anything, just to have something to hold. He set it down again. All right, he said. I won't send it. He paused. But I want you to know it was written. Daniel nodded once. A moment passed between them. Friedrich turned slightly in his chair toward the window and then back. He was working toward something. Daniel could tell. He had learned to read the pauses of people who chose their words carefully. When I hired you, Friedrich said, I recognized your name. The room was very quiet. I was at the Musikverein in October 2013, Friedrich said. My wife and we attended the Philharmonic that season regularly. The night of your concerto, she cried during the second movement. She almost never cried at concerts. He looked at his desk. She passed away the following year. But she spoke about that performance more than once afterward. I remembered the name. Daniel sat with his hands resting on his knees. His face had not changed. Only his breathing had shifted, slightly deeper, the way breathing shifts when something lands that you were not ready for. I hired you because you needed the job and you were qualified, Friedrich said. I said nothing about the other thing because it wasn't mine to say. He looked up. I still believe that. I'm not telling you now to pressure you. I'm telling you because I think you should know that someone in this building has always known. Daniel looked at the window. The courtyard was empty now. A pigeon landed on the sill outside, looked in briefly, and left. There's something else, Friedrich said. He said it carefully, the way you set something fragile on a table. Ms. Hargrove's interview subject for this afternoon has cancelled. A pianist illness, apparently. She's been on the phone since 7 this morning, trying to find a replacement. He stopped. Her crew is still in the hotel until this evening. He did not say anything after that. He simply let the information sit between them, like an object placed on a table that either man could choose to pick up or leave alone. Daniel looked at him. Friedrich looked back. I'll start my rounds, Daniel said. Of course, Friedrich said. Daniel stood. He picked up his logbook from the chair beside him. He moved to the door, opened it, and stepped back into the corridor, with its smell of clean linen and floor wax and the particular dry warmth of a building that had been heated for 100 years. He did his first 3 jobs without thinking about the conversation. A stuck window latch on the second floor. A light bulb in the stairwell. A leak under the sink in room 317 that turned out to be a loose fitting, fixed in 2 minutes. He did his work. The work held him, the way it always had. At 11:15 he came through the lobby on his way to the supply room. It was quiet at that hour. Guests at breakfast or out in the city. The morning rush of arrivals not yet started. The pale stone floor caught the gray October light coming through the tall windows. The grand piano sat in its corner, lid down, unplayed. Daniel stopped. He stood 5 feet from it. He looked at the closed lid, the polished wood, the keys hidden beneath it. He stood there long enough that a passing housekeeper glanced at him. Then he picked up his cart and walked to the supply room. But his hands, hanging at his sides, were not quite still. Before we get to what happened next, if this story has you holding your breath, hit subscribe right now and tell me in the comments, have you ever watched someone stay quiet when they had every right to speak? Because Daniel Osei had stayed quiet for 2 days. He had absorbed the clip, the view count, Friedrich's careful words, and his daughter's unanswered question. He had walked past that piano and kept walking. But some doors, once opened, don't close the same way twice. And Priya was about to make sure of it. Isabel's crew had been packing since 3 o'clock. The cancellation had put her in a particular kind of mood, not loud, not sharp, but compressed. The way frustration gets when it has nowhere useful to go. Equipment cases were being loaded onto a trolley near the main entrance. The cameraman worked in silence. The producer had been on his phone for the better part of an hour, trying to salvage something from the wasted afternoon. Isabel stood in the center of the lobby with her arms crossed, looking at the room the way she might look at a review that had disappointed her. She was still mic'd. The cameraman's camera was on his shoulder, not raised, recording ambient footage, the kind of material that filled the gaps between planned shots. Daniel was at the far end of the lobby with a mop. A guest had spilled something near the reading chairs earlier in the afternoon, and he had been called down to deal with it. The stone floor was wide between them. He worked in steady strokes, methodical, his back mostly to the room. Priya sat on the third step of the main staircase with her homework open on her lap. She had arrived at 3:30, the way she always did, and had found the corner of the staircase that she had claimed as her own on previous afternoons out of the way, with a clear line of sight to the lobby. She had her pencil out. She was not drawing, she was watching. Isabel turned slightly and addressed the cameraman, though her voice carried easily in the open space. "It's a beautiful hotel," she said. "It really is. But there's something about filming in venues that don't quite have a coherent sense of occasion. The staff are quaint. The energy as well." She made a small gesture with one hand, the kind of gesture that finishes a sentence without completing it. The cameraman kept his angle. Priya's pencil stopped moving. She looked up from her homework. She looked across the lobby at her father. His back was still to the room. The mop moved in the same steady strokes. He had heard it. Priya knew he had heard it because the strokes had slowed, just slightly, just for a moment, before returning to their rhythm. She looked at him for a long time. Then she closed her homework. She stood up from the staircase. She crossed the lobby without hurrying, without looking at Isabel, without looking at the camera. She walked to the far corner where the grand piano sat, the one that was almost never played, the one that guests walked past without noticing, the one with the lid down and a thin coat of dust on the fallboard that Daniel wiped away every Thursday as part of his rounds. She pulled out the bench. She sat down. She placed her hands on the closed lid for a moment. Then she lifted the fallboard and set it back, and the keys were there, ivory and black, clean, the piano tuned quarterly by a service the hotel contracted. She looked at the keys for a moment. Then she placed her hands on them, fingers curved, wrists level, thumbs resting lightly at the edge of the naturals. The position was exact. She could not play. She had never had a lesson, but she had watched her father in the back room of the apartment, in the hours when he thought she was asleep, pressing keys so quietly they made almost no sound, finding notes, maybe, or just remembering what they felt like beneath his fingers. She had watched the shape his hands made. She had memorized it the way she memorized everything she decided was worth keeping. She held the position and looked across the lobby at her father. He had stopped mopping. He stood with the mop handle in both hands, his back still half-turned. He did not move for a moment. Then he turned fully, and he looked at his daughter, this small, serious 8-year-old sitting at a grand piano she did not know how to play, her hands in exactly the right position, her eyes on him and only him. His jaw moved once. He set the mop against the wall. He walked across the lobby. He walked past the reading chairs, past the center of the room, past Isabel Hargrove and her producer and her packed equipment cases. He did not look at any of them. He walked to the piano and he stood beside the bench and he looked down at Priya, and she looked up at him, and she did not say a word. He sat down beside her. The bench was long enough for two. His hands came to rest on the keys just to the left of hers. He felt the ivory under his fingertips cool, smooth, exactly as he remembered. His eyes went to the keyboard. He was quiet for one breath. Then two. Across the room, the cameraman raised the camera. He began without announcement. No adjustment of the bench. No stretching of fingers. No pause for breath. the way performers pause, drawing attention to themselves before the first note. He simply placed his hands on the keys and began, the way a man begins, a task he has done 10,000 times and never forgotten. The first notes were soft, almost too soft for the lobby's size. But the lobby was stone and high ceilings, and stone carries sound, the way water carries light further than you expect, cleaner than seems possible. The opening phrase moved across the marble floor and up the walls and reached the far corners of the room before anyone had understood that something had changed. It was not a famous piece. It had no name that anyone in the room would recognize, because it had no name at all. Daniel had never titled it. He had written it in the weeks after Mira's funeral, in the apartment at night while Priya slept, working by feel in the dark because he could not bring himself to turn on a light. He had played it once, at the graveside, on a borrowed keyboard that a friend had carried there in a case. After that, he had put it away. What came out of that piano now was not a performance. It was something older than performance. The piece moved in the way grief actually moves, not in a straight line, not building simply from quiet to loud, but in waves that returned and shifted and found new angles each time they came back. The opening phrase was spare, almost plain. It stated something simple, like a fact read aloud. This is what was here. Then it moved away from that fact, circled it, came at it from a different direction, found something inside it that the first statement had not revealed. A housekeeper near the service door stopped walking. She did not move again. The cameraman kept his frame steady. His hands, on the camera body, had gone very still. He was not thinking about framing. He was not thinking about anything. He was listening. Isabel stood where she had been standing when Daniel sat down. She had not moved. Her arms, which had been crossed, had come apart at some point in the first minute, she did not remember when. She held them at her sides now. Her face was not performing anything. The piece reached its first peak, not loud, but full, the way a room gets full of something that has no name, and then it pulled back. It went quiet again, quieter than before. A single line in the middle register, patient and deliberate, like a sentence being written carefully because it needed to be exactly right. Friedrich, at the edge of the lobby near the reading chairs, pressed his back against the wall. He had heard a great deal of music in this city. He had sat in the Musikverein and the Konzerthaus and a dozen smaller venues over the course of a long life, and he had learned somewhere along the way the difference between music that was skillful and music that was necessary. This was necessary. He could not have explained the difference in words, but he felt it in the way his breathing had slowed without his deciding to slow it. Two guests who had come down the main staircase on their way out stopped at the third step from the bottom. They looked at each other. They sat down on the step. Priya had folded her hands in her lap. She was watching her father's hands, not his face. She watched the way the left hand moved wide intervals, patient, holding the low notes down while the right hand found the melody above. She had seen those hands fix radiators. She had seen them pack her school bag in the mornings when she was running late. She had never seen them do this. The piece gathered itself. It built, not suddenly, not with drama, but with the particular weight of something that has been traveling a long distance and is finally arriving. The full range of the instrument opened up. Both hands working across the width of the keys, the low notes resonating in the stone beneath their feet, the high notes clear and precise as a name called across a quiet room. It was the sound of a man saying something he had not been able to say in any other language. Then it came down, slowly, the way the sun comes down, not stopping, not hurrying, following the only path available. The last phrase was the opening phrase again, but changed. The same notes almost, the same shape, but it meant something different now because of everything that had come between them. The final note was a single low chord, held until it was almost nothing. Then it was nothing. Daniel's hands stayed on the keys for 2 seconds after the sound was gone. Then he lifted them and rested them in his lap. The lobby did not respond. Not immediately. Not with the quick applause of an audience that has been waiting for its cue. The people in that room, the guests on the staircase, the housekeeper at the service door, the cameraman with his camera, the producer who had stopped typing. Friedrich against the wall, they stayed exactly where they were, in the specific stillness of people who are not ready to move yet. Because moving would mean it was over. Priya lifted her head from where she had been watching his hands. She leaned sideways and rested her cheek against his arm. He put one hand over hers. They sat like that. Isabel turned, slowly, and looked at Friedrich across the room. Her voice, when it came, was the quietest it had been since she arrived at the hotel. All the broadcast had gone out of it. "Who is he?" she said. Friedrich crossed the lobby without hurrying. He moved past the reading chairs, past the equipment cases still stacked near the entrance, past Isabel's producer, who was staring at his tablet with an expression that had nothing to do with disappointment anymore. Friedrich stopped a few feet from Isabel and looked at her with the calm of a man who had been waiting for this question for 2 years. "His name is Daniel Ose," Friedrich said. "He works maintenance here. Has done for 6 years." Isabel waited. She understood there was more. Before that, Friedrich said, "He was Daniel Ose Voss. He won the Vienna Conservatory's Senior Composition Prize in 2005. He was 19. The first student of his background to win it." He paused. In October 2013, the Vienna Philharmonic performed an original concerto he had written. I was in the audience. My wife was beside me. She cried during the second movement. Isabel was very still. "His wife died in 2015, Friedrich said, during the birth of his daughter. 2 months later, he walked off a concert stage in Prague in the middle of a performance. He flew home. He has not performed publicly since." He glanced toward the piano, where Daniel and Priya still sat, until now. The lobby had begun to resume its sounds. A door opening somewhere, a cart in the corridor, the ordinary noise of a building returning to itself. But around the piano, the air was still different. The guests on the staircase had finally moved, slowly, as though they were reluctant to leave. Isabel's producer looked up from his tablet. "Isabel," he said. His voice was odd, flattened. She looked at him. He turned the tablet toward her. The footage from the lobby, raw, unedited, uploaded to the channel's community tab 15 minutes into the performance as a test, had a number beside it that was moving upward in visible increments. He had never seen a number move like that. Not on any content they had produced. Not once in 11 years. Isabel looked at the number for a moment. Then she looked at Friedrich. "Thank you," she said. She said it plainly, without the broadcast warmth. Then she walked toward the piano. Daniel had not moved from the bench. Priya was beside him, her head no longer on his arm, sitting upright now, watching Isabel approach with the particular alertness of a child who has decided to pay close attention. Isabel stopped at a respectful distance. "Mr. Ose," she said. He looked at her. "I want to address what I said 2 days ago." She did not soften it or reframe it. "The remark I made on camera, it was careless. It was made at your expense. I'm telling you that directly." Daniel said nothing for a moment. "All right," he said. Isabel nodded once. She was not accustomed to responses that short, and it showed a slight pause, a recalibration. "I'd like to speak with you on camera, about your work, your history, whatever you're willing to share." "No," Daniel said. Her expression did not change, but something behind it shifted. "There's one thing I'd like," he said. "Whatever you publish, include my daughter's name. Priya Ose." He looked at Priya briefly. "She's the reason I sat down." Isabel looked at Priya. Priya looked back at her with the level gaze of someone who had already made up her mind about this person and was simply confirming it. "I'll include it," Isabel said. "I'll make sure it's clear." Daniel nodded. He stood from the bench. The next 30 minutes passed in Friedrich's office, which felt smaller than usual with 4 adults in it. Isabel's producer set his tablet on the desk and spoke about what they intended to publish and how. Isabel sat in the chair across from Friedrich's desk and said little. Daniel stood near the wall with his arms at his sides and listened. He signed nothing. He agreed to nothing in writing. What he did say, once, when the producer asked if there was anything he wanted the audience to know, just the name. The producer wrote it down. Friedrich walked them out through the lobby. Isabel and her producer took the equipment cases through the main entrance. Priya had gathered her homework from the staircase and stuffed it into her bag, and she came to stand beside Daniel at the side door, the staff entrance, the narrow one, the one they always used. They stepped out into the evening. October in Vienna had gone fully dark by 6 o'clock. The street outside the hotel smelled of damp stone and the first cold that comes before real winter. Their breath showed faintly in the air. They walked half a block before Priya spoke. "Can we stop for ice cream?" He looked down at her. "It's cold," he said. "I know," she said. He was quiet for a moment. "Yes," he said. They turned at the corner. Priya's school bag bounced against her back. In his coat pocket, Daniel's phone began to vibrate once, then again, then a third time before he had reached the next street lamp. He did not take it out. He kept walking. Priya's hand finding his in the dark the way it always did, small and warm and entirely certain. The phone buzzed again. The numbers on the other end were ones he did not recognize, calling from cities he had not visited in years. Places that had once known his name and were now, in the space of a single evening, remembering it. 6 months passed the way good things sometimes do quietly, without announcement, one ordinary day at a time. The video had accumulated more views than Isabel's producer had ever tracked on a single piece of content. He had told her the final number in a phone call 3 weeks after Vienna, and she had been quiet for a moment before saying that she understood what it meant. She did understand. She had spent 20 years building an audience by telling people what mattered in music, and in 6 minutes of lobby footage she had been shown something she had not been able to manufacture in all that time. Her follow-up segment ran in November. She addressed the original clip directly, in her own voice, without softening what she had said or the way she had said it. She named Daniel. She named Priya. She told her audience what Friedrich had told her, and she told them what she had witnessed, and she told them that the two things, the clip and the performance, needed to be seen together to be understood properly. Her audience, which had opinions about everything, had strong opinions about this. The comment section ran for days. Some of what they wrote found its way to Daniel, forwarded by people he had not heard from in years. He read none of it. What he did read was a letter from the Vienna Conservatory, which arrived on a Tuesday morning in a cream-colored envelope with the institution's crest on the flap. The letter was written in German, 3 paragraphs, and signed by a woman named Dr. Krives Hartmann, whose title indicated she oversaw the composition department. She was inviting him to teach a seminar one semester, 1 afternoon per week, advanced students. The terms were his to name. She wrote that they had followed his work with great interest and looked forward to the possibility of his return. He read the letter twice. Then he called the number at the bottom and spoke to Dr. Hartmann's assistant for 4 minutes, mostly listening. He asked 2 questions. He said he would let them know by the end of the week. He let them know on Thursday. The answer was yes. Friedrich heard about it at the hotel the following morning. He said nothing when Daniel told him, but he put his hand briefly on Daniel's shoulder, 1 firm press, then gone, and that was enough. The arrangement at the hotel stayed in place, by choice. 2 days a week, the same corridors, the same logbook, the same early morning quiet before the guests came down. Friedrich had offered to rearrange the schedule around the conservatory days. Daniel had told him the schedule was fine. Some things you keep, because they held you when holding was what you needed. He understood that now in a way he had not before. The keyboard came out of the closet on a Saturday in April. Priya was at the kitchen table when he did it, eating toast and reading a book she had borrowed from school. She looked up when she heard the closet door. She watched him pull the cloth away and carry the keyboard into the living room, where the light came through better in the mornings. He set it on the table they had cleared the night before, without either of them saying why they were clearing it. He sat down. He did not play Mira's piece. He had played that once in public, and it had said what it needed to say. What came out now was something he had not heard before. Not a memory, not a recovered thing, but something forming as his hands found it, tentative in the first measures and then more certain, the way a sentence becomes clearer as you write it. A new piece. Starting from now, not from before. Priya set down her book. She listened for a while. Then she picked up her pencil and opened her sketchbook to the portrait, the one she had drawn months ago, the one with the figure and the glasses and the small circle above his head. She looked at it. She added something at the bottom of the page, working carefully with the pencil, taking her time. When Daniel finished, she brought it to him. The circle was still there. It had always been there, in every version she had drawn, but now, beneath the figure's hands, she had drawn the shape of a piano simple, the way an 8-year-old draws a piano, more suggestion than detail, but clear enough. Keys. A lid. The same hands that had always been in the drawing, resting above them at last. He looked at the drawing for a long time. "What does the circle mean?" he said. "The one above my head. I never asked you properly." Priya took the sketchbook back. She looked at the circle, tilting her head slightly the way she always did when she was considering something seriously. "I draw it on all the important people," she said. "I know," he said. "But what does it mean?" She shrugged. The easy shrug of someone for whom the answer is obvious. "That you were always going to come back," she said. She went back to the kitchen table. She picked up her toast. She opened her book. Daniel turned back to the keyboard. Outside the window, Vienna was moving through a pale April morning, trams and voices and the particular light of a city that had been making music for 300 years. A city that had held his grief and his silence and his daughter and his work, and was now, quietly, holding something new. He put his hands on the keys. He played. And there are moments in a life that don't announce themselves, no fanfare, no ceremony. Just a man at a keyboard on a Saturday morning, while his daughter reads nearby. And the music finding its way back into the world, one note at a time, as if it had simply been waiting, all along, for the right morning to return. The truest things often work that way. They don't require an audience. They only require that you begin.